Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to point out that Andrew Scheer is campaigning exactly the way he did before the election. Still, I mean, it's the same thing. And I don't know if that's a winning strategy. I mean, apparently it was not a winning strategy because he is not the prime minister currently. But this is Andrew Scheer's style, I suppose. And here's his tweet, and he says, Canada's Conservatives have 4 key priorities: keeping Canada strong and united, helping Canadians get ahead, restoring ethics and accountability to government, getting Canada's energy sector back to work. Justin Trudeau needs to recall Parliament and get to work. And while I agree, we're still 11 days out from having a throne speech or anything happening. That's supposed to be happening on November 20th. And Justin Trudeau is supposed to start meeting with people on Monday, November 11th. But I find this rhetoric change a little bit notable. Instead of talking about how diversity is our strength, Mr. Scheer's talking about strong and united Canada. That's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting change in messaging. Apparently, the diversity is our strengthy division strength didn't work out so well. National Post, and I've been following this story for a long time. I talked about this while campaigning. I talk about it all the time, really. Like, the money laundering is inflating our real estate markets. This is fake money. You don't want fake money propping up the markets, because fake money doesn't reflect the amount that regular people make. And British Columbia, Vancouver, Victoria, a lot of British Columbia is unaffordable for most regular Canadians with regular jobs. You can't live in Vancouver, in a house in Vancouver. Like, if you grew up in the 80s in a house in Vancouver, that house is now worth millions of dollars probably. And your family probably sold it a while ago, right? And so Canada has fundamentally changed. It's very interesting. But the money laundering that was going through casinos and then into the banking and the real estate market, not the banking market, the real estate market, is not doing anyone any favors. And here is the report on that, about the report that's coming up. Because, they have to look into it, and that includes public inquiries. I think that public inquiries are valuable, but at the same time, they're not very efficient. It doesn't get a lot of information out. They kind of go off the rails sometimes. Sometimes you get somebody who's got 10 minutes of time to talk, and they want to talk about the thing they want to talk about and not the thing that's on everyone's mind. And this happens all the time. It doesn't matter if you're at a meeting about library funding or transit funding or anything to that effect. People try and stay in the guidelines of the meeting, but often start talking, and usually it's to give background information or whatever, but often they'll start telling a story instead of addressing the issue at hand, and they take up all of the time and blah, 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 blah. It's just very, very inefficient. Anyway, here's the National Post. Pity the commissioner overseeing the inquiry into the BC money laundering. The enormity of the task before Austin Cullen, a BC Supreme Court Associate Chief Justice, to investigate the scope, impact, and causes of money laundering in BC was on full display Thursday night at the resumption of the inquiry's public comment phase. In a hotel conference room filled with about 100 people, speaker after speaker, armed mostly with anecdotes and personal observations, pressed the commissioner to investigate money laundering's reach into casinos, residential construction, money transfer services, massage parlors, real estate, and underground birth tourism industry. Some speakers tied the laundering of money to the housing affordability crisis, while others linked it to the opiate and overdose epidemic. They cast blame on corrupt municipal politicians, corrupt provincial politicians. Daggers were mostly thrown at the previous BC Liberal government. Under-resourced police investigators and incompetence at FinTrack, the federal agency responsible for monitoring large cash transactions. Stepping up to the podium, Speaker Ken McLennan expressed surprise so many people had taken an interest in such a cumbersome mess. Quote, "I'm really impressed when I see the turnout for such an onerous issue that's a black eye for the history of Canada," he says. The year-long inquiry was spurred in part by a pair of scathing reports by the retired RCMP Deputy Commissioner Peter German. His first report in 2018 described how, for years, casinos had unwittingly served as laundromats for the proceeds of organized crime. A second report this year noted how opaque ownership structures in the real estate market provided a veil to conceal money laundering, and how luxury car dealers reported buyers bringing bags of money or using multiple wire transfers to purchased vehicles. Okay. This bags of money thing, that's proof that the the money is not necessarily legit. Most people don't walk around with bags of money, right? Hockey bags full of money. That's a red flag, okay? Note that for later in the article. I just want to point that out. Back to the article. A separate provincial expert panel estimated that up to $5 billion was funneled through BC's real estate market last year alone. Not everyone was convinced of the need for an inquiry. Former BC Attorney General Wally Opal, who presided over the missing women inquiry in 2010, told CBC News earlier this year one question needed to be asked: is there anything more we can learn that wasn't covered in the reports? Yes. Why are we doing this? What more can we learn? I mean, to an extent, I agree with him, to the extent that maybe we should start cracking down now and continue the process while we're cracking down. Because if we have ideas on what's happening and why, there's a possible path to cracking down on this, right? But I don't know if that's the direction he's going. Back to this. Durbin told the Post this week that while inquiries can be costly, they can find fault, which his reports did not do. Quote, money laundering is the back office of organized crime, he said. We've known for a long time, if you wish to attack organized crime effectively, oftentimes going after money is the way to do it. The inquiry was announced by Premier John Horgan in May, saying the magnitude of the problem was far worse than we imagined. I scroll down. But for now, the Commission is still in an exploratory phase, seeking the public's input to key questions. How is money laundering manifesting itself? What have been the consequences? And what are the solutions? It talks about how the meeting goes off the rails and kind of outlines what I was talking about at the top. So I'm just going to give some samples of things that were on topic. Okay. John Roston, a member of a local advocacy group, FarmWatch, railed against non-farmers who are being permitted to build mansions atop farmland in Richmond. Quote, we suspect that some of them are financed through money laundering, he said without elaboration. So the news article is trying to discredit this witness or this person, as well as everyone else, right? He said without elaboration, like, okay, so yeah, that's why he's there. Like, he's there for an inquiry about money laundering. So you want him to prove it? The National Post? Okay. I scroll down. Police are turning a blind eye to the links between prostitution and money laundering, says Suzanne Jay, a representative of the Asian Women for Equality Society. She suggests that prostitution out of massage parlors, nail salons, and homes was likely linked to organized crime groups. Veteran realtor Lynn Teborg complained that until recently too many real estate transactions relied on the honor system, and described the mandatory reporting of suspicious or large cash deals to FinTrack a waste of time because of the bureaucratic nightmare of incompetence at the federal agency. Some of my observations are anecdotal, but they could be based on fact, she said. David Chen, a former Vancouver mayoral candidate, drew attention to the underground birth tourism industry. The reason why this is connected to money laundering is it's an unregulated, unrecognized industry, he said. They cannot get a business license from the city of Richmond. Their business is run primarily by cash. He cited a recent case out of Orange County in California in which a Chinese national pled guilty to running a birth tourism business that charged wealthy pregnant women tens of thousands of dollars to give birth in the U.S. so their children could get American citizenship. An earlier grand jury indictment alleged the owner had served more than 500 clients and had received $300 million in international wire transfers from China over 2 years. Chances are this model is not different from what is occurring here, he said. I scroll down. The most boisterous applause of the evening came when resident Jackie Turner recalled lining up at City Hall to pay her property taxes and seeing others pay thousands and thousands in cash over the counter. Surely the city of Richmond must have known this is illegal money, she said, without citing any proof. Okay, I think City Hall should be investigated. The city has since imposed a $10,000 limit on cash payments. Now just think to yourself, if your property taxes are in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, when's the last time you went down and got small bills, put them in a hockey bag, and drove down to City Hall to pay your property taxes? That's not how you pay your bills? Welcome to Richmond, BC, where they have to impose a $10,000 limit on cash payments. Right? Weird. Doesn't it seem weird? It seems weird. So, and having the news article try and discredit her seems weirder. Is weirder a word? Even more strange. Let's use that. Seems even more strange. So back to the article, and I'm just going to finish it off. After comparing money launderers, this is the funniest part of the article to me. Okay, this made me actually laugh out loud this morning. So, okay. After comparing money launderers in Canada to cartels in Mexico, resident Don Flintoff said action was needed now, but suggests this whole exercise could produce a report, quote, which may sit on somebody's shelf in an office in Victoria and gather dust. An interim report is due in November 2020. To do just that, right? To sit on the shelf and do nothing. This is moving on because I don't know what more I can say about that other than the money laundering is rampant and nobody appears to be willing to do anything other than talk to people and congratulate them for showing up and then have the newspaper discredit them later. Right? Like, thanks guys for showing up. You seem really interested in this. Well, yeah, the houses cost twice as much as we can afford because there's a lot of money laundering going on. Fix it. Okay. Moving on. The Star is reporting. This is an interesting article. This is an interesting case. The Shermans were billionaires and they're donors to the Liberal Party and they have associations with Big Pharma. And they were murdered. And they're trying to keep, they being now the estate, is trying to keep their what should be public records sealed after they were murdered. So I found this interesting, so I'm going to report on it. It kind of touches politics in that they were in the liberal circles, but it's just an interesting story that caught my attention when it happened, and well, there's been a recent update. So here we go. The Star is reporting the Sherman family's appeal to keep estate details secret headed to the Supreme Court. The Star and its reporter earlier this year won a ruling at the Ontario Court of Appeal to make the Sherman estate files public. The trustees for the Sherman estate sought to leave to appeal that ruling, and on Thursday, the Supreme Court of Canada allowed the appeal. That means they applied to the Supreme Court of Canada to hear the case, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, we'll hear that case. They only hear 60 of roughly 800 per year, so it's rare for the Supreme Court to uptake a case. So it's interesting that they chose this one. Back to the article. In Canada, court documents and proceedings are typically public, including estate files that deal with the probate of an estate after death. Barry Sherman, founder of generic drug giant Apotex, and his wife, Honey, a well-known philanthropist, were found dead in their home December 15th, 2017. They had been strangled, their bodies held in a seated position by belts looped around a railing at the edge of their basement pool. The Star's reporter first asked for the Sherman estate documents in 2018, and a clerk at the counter of the downtown Superior Court said there was a protective order on the file made by Justice Sean Dunphy. I scroll down a bit. The Star and its reporter appealed to the Ontario Court of Appeal, which made a unanimous ruling overturning Dunphy's decision, which would have made the estate files public had the Shermans not almost immediately asked the Supreme Court for a hearing. In the decision by Justices David Dorothy, Paul Rouleau, and C. William Horrigan, sorry if I've got that wrong, the Court of Appeal upheld the open court principle in Canada and found that while the Shermans want to keep family and estate-related matters private, and they want to grieve in private, that is not sufficient to seal what is normally a public file. The Court of Appeal also took issue with Dunphy's contention that because the Sherman couple was murdered, the trustee of the estate of the family members of the estate or the family members of the estate would be in danger if any information was revealed. The Sherman family had been provided the court with an affidavit that the Court of Appeal noted was not based on any information provided by police investigating the crime and so was speculation, not grounded in evidence as the law requires. The affidavit and the identity of its author are sealed. The affidavit warns of, quote, kidnapping and violence should any information be released. A Toronto homicide detective investigating the Sherman case, Detective Constable Dennis Yim, recently told a Toronto court that to his knowledge, nobody in the Sherman family is in danger. The case is being investigated as a double homicide, and police are currently reviewing a voluminous amount of information and a report by Toronto Police Intelligence analysts before applying for more judicial production orders. Yim also revealed during a court challenge by the Star to have some police files on the case unsealed that the estate files of Barry and Honey Sherman are embedded in their investigation files. I think that's important too, that they're part of the investigation. Still, that shouldn't preclude them becoming public at some point anyway. Back to the article. Now that the estate case is headed to the Supreme Court for a hearing, the estate files will remain sealed pending the hearing, which will be on an expedited basis according to the Supreme Court. A date has not yet been set for the hearing in Ottawa before the full court. So, I mean, that's really interesting to me, right? Like, it seems, in addition to being murdered in a just ghastly sounding way, the estate files are going to be sealed and now go to this process. I mean, wow, talk about complicated, talk about just wild stuff happening in Canada, right? And speaking of that, here's the City TV news. And I was going to show you one stabbing that happened this morning, but the news had two. So this happened last night and this morning. So last night, a teen was stabbed behind a Scarborough restaurant, right? 6:30 p.m. The victim was found with serious injuries. Police are on the lookout for two masked males who fled the area on foot. That's Scarborough. And then this morning, November 9th, 2019, and this was posted 7:27 a.m. Early morning North York stabbing sends one to hospital. An early morning stabbing in North York has sent one man to hospital with serious injuries. Police say it happened 6 a.m. Saturday morning near the intersection of Keele Street and Grand Divine Drive, just north of Shepherd. This victim was found with serious stab wounds and rushed to the trauma center. So, as I said, wild stuff happening in Canada. Law and order, rule of law, sealed documents, sealed orders, and all sorts of other stuff. Just seems, and money laundering to boot, right? Where's the line? I thought rule of law meant rule of law for everybody, right? Seems you can stab people with impunity, shoot people with impunity, and they say ban the guns. Soon we'll have a knife ban, I'm sure. John Tory gets that idea from London or something. But it seems like there's a whole lot of evidence that the police or some level is not able to respond appropriately, and we have increased violence. We have murders that are like I said, just awful sounding, and people laundering money with impunity. And we've got, oh, lovely to see you here. You guys seem interested in this. Yeah, you think? So just seems wild to me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and check out CanadaPoly.com.